Mike Dell's World number 167 for September 11th, 2010. Brought to you by Citrix GoToMeeting. Go get your free 30-day trial at www.gotomeeting.com/techpodcast. That's gotomeeting.com/techpodcast for your free 30-day trial. Hey, I got a blast from the past here. I want to play an old Benzoid report from 4 years ago. It was the 5th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Mind you, the audio quality is not as good as it is now on this podcast, but definitely worth listening to. There's some good stories in there and some clips from various media outlets and all that. And it is pretty interesting, and, we shouldn't ever forget. So anyway, without further ado, here is Benzoid Report number 43, and we'll catch you later. Benzoid Report number 43 for September 11th, 2006.
The 5th anniversary of the September 11th, 2001 al-Qaeda attacks on the United States is a reminder of the inhumanity of terrorists. Extremists like al-Qaeda use a perverted version of Islam in an attempt to justify murder and violence. But no faith condones the deliberate killing of civilians, and no cause or grievance can ever justify it. The victims of the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon building outside Washington, D.C., were citizens of more than 90 countries. Both before and after those attacks, the followers of al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden and others brought tragedy and destruction around the world. Terrorists struck targets in Argentina, Britain, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Jordan, Kenya, Morocco, the Philippines, Spain, and elsewhere. In 2002, a U.S.-led coalition removed the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. In place of extremists who harbored al-Qaeda, Afghanistan now has a new constitution and a democratically elected president and parliament. President George W. Bush says that the United States, its friends, and allies have taken the fight to the enemy.
Yet this war is more than a military conflict. It is the decisive ideological struggle of the 21st century. On one side are those who believe in freedom and moderation, the right of all people to speak, worship, and live in liberty. On the other side are those driven by tyranny and extremism, the right of a self-appointed few to impose their fanatical views on all the rest. We did not ask for this war, but we're answering history's call with confidence, and we will prevail.
Mr. Bush says in the war on terrorism, the path will be very uphill and uneven, but he says, we can be confident of the outcome, because America will not waver, and because the direction of history leads toward freedom.
That was an editorial reflecting the views of the United States government.
Hey, Mike. This is Curtis from Over the Sleeper Berth Cast. And just answering your call out to reminisce, tell my little story of where I was at or during 9/11. It's kind of odd. I definitely do remember it, and it seems like almost every year I end up right in about the same place on September 11th. I was going up I-5, and I actually had parked for the night at, now I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember it's as you go north of Redding, California, and go up up towards Mount Shasta, up towards Weed. There's a little spot there to pull off something flaps, and I can't remember the name of it now. I should probably call you back later to leave another one on when I actually can remember it. But in case I don't, I'll finish this. And that is simply, it was strange. I woke up. At that time, I didn't have a satellite. It was just regular TV. And so whatever channel was local, I got the news. I was fixing breakfast and saw the planes hitting the tower. And I thought, what kind of deal are they showing here? I really did think it was fake. And I've got to confess It's a terrible thing to reveal, but I've had to deliver in New York City before, and my first initial thought was, all right, maybe New York City will be all blown off the face of the earth. Of course, reality sunk in. I realized how devastating that was, and that people's lives were lost that day, and that was a sad thing. But that's where I was, and I'm coming up on a way station right now, so I think that's probably enough of the story. An excellent idea to do this, though. Thanks for letting me be a part of the conversation, Mike.
Morning in September, turned black with burning ember. He'd never seen a blaze like this before. His heart is disbelieving when his eyes tell him he's seeing. Does he stay and fight or run straight for the door? But a soft voice from inside says, don't fear, I'm right behind. And though faint at first, the voice becomes his own. And without hesitation, in the face of devastation, the man moves in, and we are not alone. He answered the call to glory, the quest to set things right, the mission of a lifetime, a beacon in the night, protector of the people, hero of the world. On behalf of our own glory, he answered the call to glory. And forever will his name be written in the stars. He answered the call to glory. Now we're mourning in September. Amid the ashes we remember all the lives we've lost, the souls they took today. But from beneath the ruination thrives a rising fighting nation. Let them know today and always we will not be kept away. 'Cause there's a voice that's gaining ground. It whispers we will not go down. And though we are afraid, the voice becomes our own. And with our faces to the sky and our banners carried high, we carry on star-spangled, for in our stripes we're not alone. Let us answer the call to glory, the quest to set things right, the mission of a lifetime, beacon in night, stronger when united, one nation under God, and on behalf of our own glory, let us answer the call to glory. And forever will America be written in the stars when we answer the call to glory. The quest to set things right, mission of a lifetime, a beacon in the night. We're stronger when united, one nation under God, and on behalf of our own glory, let us answer the call to glory, and forever will America be written in the stars when we answer the call to glory. Morning in September, turned black with burning ember. He'd never seen a blaze like this before.
Hey, Michael, it's Mark Yoshimoto Nemkov, and I remember September 11th, 2001 very well, the morning of. Back then, I was splitting my time between, I was a screenwriter for hire, I was working on several assignments at the time, and so my mornings would be very busy. I'd be writing nonstop from like 6:30 to 10, and nobody would call me. Everybody knew not to call me in the morning. And in the afternoons, I'd kind of, write until whenever, 10:30, 11. Then I'd shower and I'd drive down to the office where I was running a very successful little Hollywood music production company. And that weekend, we had brought in to town Gordon Gano, who is the lead singer of the Violent Femmes, because he was going to sing the lead vocal on a theme that we were doing for the show Off Center, which was a sitcom on the WB network that I believe ran for one, maybe 2 seasons. And so we had Gordon fly in, and of course Gordon's from New York. So, I get a call, like, I forget what time it was, but, I was like irritated because here I am, I'm like 2 weeks away from deadline. I've already been paid to, for the first draft of the script, and I want to finish the second draft, and I want to get paid, and I'm writing away like mad, and the phone rings, and I'm like thinking, oh, fuck, something's happened with Gordon. Gordon's sick. He can't make the studio date. We're fucked. And all I could think about was like, as the phone's ringing, I'm like, do I answer it? Do I pretend like I'm in the shower? Do I deal with this? And all I'm thinking about, right, of course, is me, my problems, right? And I pick it up, and my wife says, something's just happened at the Twin Towers. Turn on the TV. And I turn it on. It was just literally moments after the first plane had hit. And I'm sitting there watching, completely horrified. I mean, I'm just stunned. I remember standing there in my sweats and my T-shirt, standing there in my little office, just probably for like 15 minutes or whatever, just like I couldn't believe what I was watching. And the phone's ringing again, and it's my dad, and it's somebody else, and and everybody's calling, and I'm standing there talking to my boss, and literally as I'm speaking to him, the second plane hits. And we were both watching at the same time on TV, and it was just like one of those moments where I literally felt like the world was going to end. I really did. I felt like I was standing there watching the beginning of the end of civilization. Like I had no idea, at that point, like when my father called, when other people called, they're like, what's going on in Los Angeles? Because somebody, I guess, there was some paranoia at the time that there was going to be maybe an attack in LA or something like that. And that's what it felt like. It was like a moment that I'll never forget because it really, to me, felt like we had pulled the rug out from under civilization, at least for that time. So that was the morning of September 11th, 2001. And Gordon Gano, actually, to his credit, showed up at the studio after watching this. We had put him up at the Hollywood Roosevelt, and he was picked up by a production assistant who took him to the studio, and he performed the track because there was nothing else for him to do. He couldn't call anybody in New York. He couldn't reach anybody because all the phones were jammed. So he had no idea if any of his friends or his family were okay, and they had no idea if he was okay. And so all any of us could do was just work. So Gordon performed the session, performed brilliantly, and then he was stuck in the city of LA for a few days because of the whole thing where you couldn't fly for a few days. So, yeah. That's what I remember from 5 years ago.
And this is Mike of the Benzoid Report podcast. And let's see, on September 11th, 2001, I was working my current job overnights, and I was living in Lake Ann. I was single at the time, so I was sort of a geek, so I would always go home and work on web pages and stuff in the morning and listen to the Bob and Tom show on the radio. Sure, some of you know who Bob and Tom are. It's Bob Cavoyan and Tom Griswold. They're a syndicated show, played on a lot of classic rock FM stations generally, but they're more or less a talk show, and they generally have childish humor and dick jokes and whatever. But they are professional broadcasters in the good sense of the word. I was sitting there working on a web page, I think, for the Cedar Rod and Gun Club, one of the web pages that I take care of. And anyway, I was working along, listening to Bob and Tom, and their news gal, Christy Lee, comes on and says, there's been an accident in New York City. An airplane had hit the towers, or hit one of the World Trade Center towers. And of course, Bob, Tom, Christy, and Chick, their sports guy, all sort of made some snide remarks about air traffic control going to sleep, or blah, blah this, blah, blah that, a couple little jokes. And not much was said about it for the first few minutes. And then they realized, this was something bigger. And they switched into information mode, and they did a serious good job at covering it, and part of what I noticed about the whole thing, of course, I flipped on the TV and was watching Fox News and flipping to NBC, flipping to CNN, with the sound off, but still listening to the Bob and Tom show. And they definitely went into full news mode. And it was the best coverage on radio that was available around here. Of course, northern Michigan is not known to be a media hotspot. And we do have a supposed news talk station, and they didn't catch on until well after the second tower had fell. By the time they went to live coverage, and of course I flipped back and forth. But the Bob and Tom show was it. And all during that time, of course, I was flipping around to web pages, and I called up a buddy of mine who was a retired New York firefighter living in Empire, Michigan. And I called him up and I said, Ed, check this out. This looks pretty serious. This was the first, when the first airplane hit. And so Ed flips on the TV, and we're chatting and watching the coverage, and of course I'm listening to the radio, and it was kind of fortunate for me that I was able to be home and have access to all the different media outlets, and the telephone, of course. And I talked to Ed for a while, and then I hung up with him, and I called my mom, who is a district manager for a large financial firm. I'll leave it at that. But she was on her way to Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, which is up in the top of the Upper Peninsula, a couple 100 miles away. And I said, hey, did you hear what was going on with in New York? An airplane hit one of the World Trade Centers. And she didn't know about it, of course, because she was listening to the talk radio station, which had nothing about it. And I told her, flip over to Bob and Tom. And, up here in northern Michigan, as a side note, all of the media outlets, TV and radio, it's not just one station. It's usually a chain of stations or a mini network. The TV stations are all doubles, like TV 7 and 4 for NBC, and 29 and 8 for ABC, 9 and 10 for CBS. They're all central studios with multiple transmitters to cover this large area. I think this market, the Traverse City Cadillac market, officially as it's known, is one of the largest geographic markets in the eastern U.S. anyway. So a lot of the stations, both TV and radio, use multiple transmitters to cover it. But Bob and Tom are on a group of stations known as the Bear, and I think it's 4 or 5. I think they're up to 5 now. At the time, I think there were 4 stations, 4 FM stations. And I gave her the frequency for the Sheboygan outlet of it, which is up by the Mackinac Bridge, and she listened to the Bob and Tom show. Well, I no sooner hung up from her, and Ed called me and said, check this out, I think another airplane hit the other tower. And just as I said, oh wow, and I looked over at the TV, and sure enough, they were replaying the hit from the second airplane. And then Ed was talking, to me. He says, it looks like that one building's listing. It's kind of tilting off to one side or another. And I said, well, I don't know. That's a pretty big building. And just as that conversation started, that tower just crumbled down. And of course, everybody's seen that and everything. But yeah, it was definitely memorable. So anyway, I have a few more comments, of course, from other people. This particular clip is from the Fly With Me X podcast. I don't know how many people are subscribed to Joe Dion's Fly With Me podcast. That's available at joepodcaster.libsyn.com. But he also has a pod show podcast. It's called Fly With Me X, which is extra content for the Fly With Me podcast. And I really meant to do this yesterday. Today is September 11th. It's about 1:30 in the afternoon, kind of getting a late start on it. But I had actually meant to do it yesterday, but I'm kind of glad I didn't, because Joe had this story on here from one of his co-pilots that I just had to include here. But if you want to get the entire Fly With Me X podcast, go to flywithme.podshow.com and download that. So here's that clip from Joe Dion's Fly With Me X podcast.
I started off in Boston and had an early departure out of Boston that morning. So we got everybody on the aircraft, pushed back from the gate, taxied out, and in front of us was an American Airlines 767, which we didn't really think much about at the time. And a couple of aircraft behind us was the United 767. And we were headed down to Fort Lauderdale. So got the engine started up, taxiing out, and the American Airlines 767 took the runway, took off, and then we went into position and hold. We actually had to hold for his wake turbulence as he took off. So we took off a few minutes later, and as we were climbing out, we kept on hearing them try to call this American Airlines. And at first I thought maybe he'd just miss a frequency or something of that nature, which is not unusual to, get a couple of calls to a guy. But after several calls and no response to the American Airlines aircraft, they started maneuvering the other aircraft out of his flight path, getting them headings, leveling them off at altitudes. And we just thought it was a little bit odd, but once again, just thought the guy had lost the frequency. So we're climbing out, and we saw Manhattan, and as we climbed, we were just north of Manhattan, getting ready to turn south, headed towards Fort Myers. And I looked out, and I looked at the cap, and said, Bob, take a look at that. Isn't that the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? And you could see straight down Central Park and see the World Trade Centers and all the beautiful buildings down there. It was postcard beautiful. Out there, and still in the background they're still trying to call this American Airlines aircraft. So we turned down to parallel Manhattan, and about the time we were abeam the World Trade Centers at 31,000 feet, I looked down and saw a column of smoke with a little mushroom cap over the top of it, probably about 300 feet over the top of the building. And I told the captain I was flying with, I said, hey, look at that. And he said, oh, it looks like there's a fire in the World Trade Center. I said, man, that's no fire, that's an explosion. And so we kind of watched it, and different guys started talking about it on the frequency. A few minutes later, American Airlines guy came up and said he heard that a regional jet had flown into the side of the World Trade Center. And even after we saw it, the captain came up, made an announcement to the passengers. If you look off the left-hand side of the aircraft, you'll see the World Trade Centers. It looks like there's a fire in one of them. So we continued on the flight and didn't really think a whole lot more of it, just kind of, curious to know what happened. So we were about 35 miles south of New York City and headed just about due south, a little bit southwest. And the controller came up and gave us a vector to fly due east, which is more 90-degree turn, which it's not unusual to get a 10, 15-degree turn for traffic, but they turned us 90 degrees, and we thought that was very unusual. And by the time I rolled wings level on a 90-degree heading, the controller came back up, and you could hear the stress in the controller's voice. And the controller said, gave us our call sign, told us to immediately turn to a westerly heading, which is a 180-degree turn, and climb to 35,000 feet. And normally at that altitude, they'll ask you if you can climb, but they told us to climb immediately. So I started the turn, and they also asked for a hardest possible turn. And once again, we didn't see aircraft, so we asked the controller if there was any aircraft in the area. And the controller came up and said, yeah, you've got a aircraft converging rapidly at your right 2 o'clock coming out of a higher altitude. I can't remember the exact terminology she used. So we were in the turn, and I looked out the window, and I looked out, saw a 767 higher than I was, in about a 40 to 45 degree angle of bank turn, good 10 to 15 degrees nose low, and making a hard turn back up to the north. So at that point in time, I turned off the autopilot and started pulling the aircraft up. When he passed by us, passed less than about 500 feet underneath us. And the captain I was flying with asked me to roll up on my other wing so we could positively identify the aircraft. And air traffic control also asked for an identification. And both of us identified the aircraft as a United 767. So we went ahead, rolled wings level, and proceeded on, and we were both asking, well, what was this guy doing? We had absolutely no idea. And then we got about another 20 minutes south of Washington, D.C., and our printer in the aircraft actually printed something from our dispatcher announcing that there was terrorist events happening throughout the country, and that we would be required to land soon. And about the same time, air traffic control came up and made a general announcement on the frequency that everybody was going to have to find a place within 100 miles to land their aircraft, or else they would assign one. At that point in time, the captain and I talked about it. We locked down the flight deck, agreed that we would not open the flight deck regardless of what was going on. We called back to the flight attendants, told them we were locking down the the cockpit, and that we would be landing soon, and to just tell the passengers we were landing because of bad weather in Fort Myers and we needed additional fuel. And I proceeded to fly the aircraft while the captain communicated with the flight attendants, dispatch, and other people. So I flew the aircraft and diverted into Columbia, South Carolina, and the captain and I both came together on downwind and stuff. He'd finished coordinating with the company, telling them where we were going. Turned downwind, landed at Columbia, and it was uneventful. We kept the aircraft locked up, or the cockpit locked up, until all the passengers were going off the aircraft. And then we got out the airplane. The flight attendants were a little shaken and stuff. We got off the airplane. And the thing that struck me was there was barely a soul in the terminal. I guess security had completely cleared everybody out of the terminal. including the passengers we had just deplaned. And we turned around and looked up, and CNN was on the monitor at the gate, seeing both World Trade Centers on fire. And it probably hadn't been 3 or 4 minutes, and then the first World Trade Center fell. And we realized what had occurred then. But that's pretty much it. Wrong place at the wrong time. Saw the whole thing transpire on 9/11.
That was back when I'd first gone to work at the eye clinic. In fact, I was working there sort of as a consultant, and not actually, even though I was going to work there every day, I wasn't actually on their payroll. They were just sort of paying me, and I was responsible for my own taxes. So, but anyway, since I was a consultant, I didn't have to be there. I wasn't actually working directly for them yet, so I didn't have to be there right when the clinic opened at 8 o'clock. So I would get out of bed kind of late and maybe go in at 10, kind of show up there at 10 o'clock in the morning or something. And so I had my alarm set for 9 a.m. It was a clock radio alarm on September 11th of 2001. And the alarm, that clock radio came on right when the news was coming on. And I heard them, and it was 9 o'clock, of course, Central Time. And I heard on the news that, they said that, World Trade Center hit by, a plane, and, one of the towers had collapsed. And, I immediately got up. I couldn't believe, so of course I immediately turned on the television, and, they had the live stuff already going, and I was just kind of riveted to the television. And so then, after that, I finally got around and drove into town to the eye clinic, and I got there, and the mood of the place, I mean, it was really somber, and I don't think much work got done at all that day, because everybody was kind of tuned in to the internet, or they were listening to radio, or they were continually trying to hit websites to find updates. I remember later, that they were kind of talking, about people were talking about it, and they said that some of the websites, I don't know, like MSNBC, really got slowed down or almost stopped because of all of the hits they were getting from people trying to find information, the latest information. And that was one of the first major events that happened where people really turned to the internet in mass numbers to really try to find out what was happening. And, so it was really interesting because, I don't think much work got done at all anywhere that day. And people were just, I think, kind of in shock, and, everyone was just sort of tuned in to what they were doing, or to what was going on, and to try to find out information. But I remember, driving past those towers, it used to be, when you were on the New Jersey Turnpike driving past New York City, of course you could look over, and those towers were, they were very tall, and they were just right up there, and you could easily see them. And, that really symbolized New York City, those twin towers, along with the Statue of Liberty. And now as an aside, my opinion, what they should do is just rebuild those towers, maybe make them a foot taller or whatever, but just replace them. And, because it's liberal utopia, they're, it's 5 years later, they haven't done a thing, they still got a giant hole in the ground, and, they're all still kind of arguing about, well, are we going to do this, we're going to do that, and, it's pretty unfortunate. And then, I guess they're going to build so-called Freedom Tower, just a single tower, but I think that they should, since that was such a symbol of New York City and a symbol of America, that they should rebuild those, the two Trade Center towers that were there. But, that's what my opinion is. So, but I guess they'll eventually do something to get rid of the hole in the ground, but, rather than bicker and argue all the time. So, anyway, that was what I remember about that day.
Okay, that was Tom Wiles, Trucker Tom. That's truckertom.podshow.com or truckerphoto.com. So anyway, yeah, also, this is Mike again, by the way. I was, while I was working on my websites, I think I was working on the Gun Club website. I also have another website, flightradio.com, and that's a website for people that have police scanners that are capable of picking up aircraft to find frequencies to program into their scanners so they can listen to their local air traffic control and airplanes in their area. And it's still online at flightradio.com. And anyway, I started that website in, I think, 98 or 99. And, it was kind of a, hobby thing. And on September 11th, 2001, it became a news gathering resource for a lot of news organizations. I was looking through the logs. That's still the all-time highest hits that radio or that website had ever gotten. Was on September 11th, 2001, and it was fascinating looking through the logs. There was just tons of NBC.com, W this that and the other.com, CNN, just tons and tons and tons of media related domain names in the log, and the normal hit rate for that website's somewhere between 100 and 150 uniques a day back then. It's actually a little higher now, but on that day and a couple of days afterwards, when FAA had shut down the entire airspace, I was getting between 5,000 and 10,000 a day unique visitors to that website. So that was quite interesting, and it was very interesting listening to the air traffic control. I also had that going. Remember, I was a single geek ham radio operator computer nerd living in the sticks in northern Michigan. I had my aircraft scanner on, listening to Minneapolis Center as they explained to the aircraft that they needed to land. You've got about 100 miles to get that on the ground, and no exceptions. And it was kind of interesting to listen to some of the pilots up there arguing with air traffic control. Well, I'm only 210 miles away from my destination. Can I just continue on? And a couple of times I heard the controller say something to the effect that, well, you can go ahead and try it, but we'll have a couple of F-16s up there to show you the ground. And I'm sure it was very confusing because they weren't telling them why they had to get down. They just told them they had to get down due to a national situation. And that was very interesting to listen to. I wish I would have recorded that, but of course back then podcasting was not even a glimmer in Adam Curry's eye or whoever. So anyway, got a couple more comments and another song here. So this one's from Jim Farley of the Musical World podcast.
Hi, Mike. This is Jim Farley, and to begin with, I need to publicly thank you for bringing me into the fold of podcasting and Podsafe Music. You definitely were the one and only catalyst in me posting songs to the PMN, as well as gently suggesting that I start to podcast. Now, several months later, I, like many others who have started listening to podcasts, have abandoned regular radio airwaves almost entirely, so thank you. I don't miss them at all, really. Now for my 9/11 story. That Tuesday morning, I had started to work in an unusual fashion. I had a customer that had called needing some batteries right away, and, well, since I had just been there the day before, I reluctantly agreed to go there first thing that morning. I knew this was going to throw my whole day out of whack. I was listening to Bob and Tom, and they started talking about the plane flying into the World Trade Center. I honestly thought they were goofing around, but they continued, and thinking they were still goofing around, I switched the station to WLW out of Cincinnati, knowing they would be on top of any such news, and they were. And as I approached the Dayton city limits, there were some F-15s or F-16s flying around the Dayton area. You'd probably know better than I would. You're the you're the plane guy, but they were fighter jets, I can tell you that. And this was really unusual, even though Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is only a few miles away. My work day ended kind of early that day due to the fact that no one was really working anywhere that I went. Everyone was glued to TV or radio, and Jane and I and our son Gordon were supposed to head to Michigan on Wednesday for a long weekend. Jane and I always do that this time of year to celebrate our anniversary on September 9th, and we decided we should still plan the trip, and partially to make sure that my grandmother, who at that time was in her 90s, was okay and not getting confused by the TV reports and things that were going on in the media. While we were in Michigan, our main media was limited because there at the cottage, there's only major network TV. We only have an outside TV antenna, and it gets really limited. NBC and ABC and CBS for the most part, and I think we ended up watching NBC for the most part, not because we thought their coverage was better, but because it and CBS had the best signals for the antenna. I'm sure we did a fair bit of channel swapping, although I remember pretty well that none of the networks really were breaking for many commercials. And I remember our dinner with you and your parents and John Martin and his father Ed and my grandmother and your grandmothers on that Friday evening following. And you and your father being pretty knowledgeable about planes made for interesting conversation, as well as John's father Ed being an ex-New York City fireman, and the fact that he lost his brother in the World Trade Center during the collapse, and of course John lost his uncle, and I'll remember that as being one of the most somber evenings I'll probably ever remember. The day after the attacks on September 12th, when we were on our way to Michigan, I kept thinking about everything that happened, and I called David Brush, who is my lyricist and business partner, to write the lyrics to a song about what happened that day. And we talked about the bravery of the firemen and policemen that, they ran into a burning building while so many others were running out of the building. And all I gave him was a title, A Call to Glory, because those men and women were all answering a call that hopefully few will ever have to get. Although every day, firemen and policemen have to answer that call. Dave and I want to thank you for playing A Call to Glory today in remembrance of those fallen heroes.
Okay, Jim. Yep, we did play that up at the beginning, near the beginning of the podcast today. And yep, I remember having dinner with all those folks up here and on that Friday night. And it was, it was definitely different, especially with Ed losing a relative there, Ed and John. And it was good that we could all sit there and talk about it. It was a bad time, but it was a good time, if that makes any sense. So anyway, to finish up my comments, the night of September 11th, 2001, I went to work as normal, and pretty much everything was normal around here. One of the things that struck me was Cherry Capital Airport in Traverse City. As I drove by the south end of the airport complex on my way to work, I noticed there was no less than 15 airliners, some types of aircraft that generally don't fly into that airport, all parked on the ramp. And at that time they were at the old terminal building, and that had two jetways and one set of stairs on a truck that they could offload aircraft with, and I imagine that was a real pain in the butt for them. not to mention, the airport runway length here is not conducive to some aircraft. Of course, they can fly anything in here, but whether or not they get it back off the ground, that's a whole other story. At least not with a full load. And so that was kind of interesting. And then I remember, working night shift. I started hearing reports of price gouging on gasoline in Michigan. And to her credit, and I don't like to give her a lot of credit, but our governor now, who was our attorney general then, did end up prosecuting a lot of gas station owners for price gouging. There was reports of gas going for $5 and $6 a gallon downstate. Up here, it jumped about, I'd say, 75 cents that day. And of course, I went and filled my truck up to the brim just in case it kept going higher. Because of course we didn't know what else was going to happen at that point. So, anyway, I got one more comment from an anonymous caller to my voicemail line. He heard my promo for this show on Mark Yoshimoto Nemcoff's Pacific Coast Hellway show. So here's that comment.
Mike, just listened to your promo on PCH to leave you a message about the 9/11 and where I was. I was in college. I was skipping class, sleeping in late, and I happened to flip on the news, and there it was. I thought it was some sort of joke at first, and found out that it was real. And I was in Connecticut, maybe about 50 miles from Ground Zero. As far as the lame media outlet, I was watching TV because it was instantaneous. Although it might be lame, it's still an instantaneous delivery as far as news goes. News on a podcast doesn't work. FYI. So just keep that in your mind.
Okay. Well, yep. As he said there, podcasting is good for entertainment, information, and other stuff that doesn't require real-time news. So yes, TV, radio, terrestrial radio, satellite radio. That's one thing that us podcasters will never be able to replace completely. But I do wish they would be less lame about it. And hopefully, with the advent of podcasting and the proliferation of it, they will come around and become good at what they do best instead of trying to be everything to everybody. And same with podcasting. We do what we do best. Well, some of us do. So anyway, I want to give credit where credit's due here. In order of my playing the clips, here it goes. The first clip was an editorial from the Voice of America. That's the shortwave broadcasting arm of the U.S. government. The second clip was from Curtis Cross of the Sleeper Birth Cast. That's sleeperbirth.com. Check him out. Then I played Call to Glory by Jim Farley and David Brush, available on the Podsafe Music Network. And then I played a clip from Mark Yoshimoto Nemcoff of Pacific Coast Hellway and Shadow Falls in Podshow LA. Look up Podshow LA at podshow.com. Or wait a minute, no, it's podshowla.podshow.com. There we go. And then I played a clip from Joe Dion's Fly With Me X podcast. And that's available at flywithme.podshow.com. And the regular Fly With Me show is available at joepodcaster.libsyn.com. And they played a song called Home Fires by Madly Jady. So That's also available on the Podsafe Music Network. And I played a clip from Trucker Tom, Tom Wiles, and that's truckertom.podshow.com or truckerphoto.com. And then I played a clip from Jim Farley of musicalworld.us, and also on the Podsafe Music Network. Just search for Jim Farley. And of course I played the anonymous clip from the anonymous listener of Pacific Coast Hellway. So I'm going to finish this out with a song from the Podsafe Music Network, No Place Like America.
There's no place like America, no place like it in this whole world. There's no place like America, you feel it when her flag is unfurled. There's a special place in God's heart for America. There's no place like America, a beacon shining freedom for all. There's no place like America, the father's lands have heard her call. Where mankind's best comes shining through, it's America. Some have put her back to the wall. When push comes to shove, she won't fall. American people know what they've got. The torch of liberty is still burning hot. Burning hot. There's no place like America. You can see it in her citizens' eyes. There's no place like America. Her patriotism no one denies. Where the law of the land makes everyone stand for America. Some have put her back to the wall. When push comes to shove, she won't fall. American people know what they've got. The torch of liberty is still burning hot. Burning hot. There's no place like America, no place like it in this whole world. There's no place like America, you feel it when her flag is unfurled. There's a special place in God's heart for America. There's a special place in God's heart for America. For America. For America. There's no place like America. America. 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 No place like America. America.
And ain't that the truth? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the stories on this podcast, and I'd like to thank each and every one that sent comments in or otherwise helped me out with this. And everybody have a good remainder of the day, and we'll get back to normal operations here at the Benzoid Report in the next couple of days. So have a good one.
The best and the brightest, served up daily by the sharpest minds in content delivery, Podshow and Limelight.